I'm Teresa Skubic, and this is Forum Daily for Friday, June 5th. Yesterday, Prime Minister Mark Carney unveiled Canada's long-awaited artificial intelligence strategy, pledging more than $2 billion in new investments aimed at boosting AI adoption, innovation, and economic growth. The strategy seeks to expand the use of artificial intelligence across the country, but critics are raising concerns about its potential impact on jobs. Conservative Deputy Leader Melissa Lantsman questioned whether the Liberals can deliver new employment opportunities through AI while youth unemployment remains elevated.
The Liberals unveiling their AI strategy this morning in Toronto with what seemingly is very lofty goals, but no plan to deliver on that. Very short on details, a very ambitious plan which lacks a lot of details that I think Canadians have been waiting for a very long time. Canada was the first country in 2017 to put forward an AI strategy, and 9 years later, we see that strategy certainly hasn't worked. It certainly hasn't led to adoption. In fact, we're still waiting, I think, in some cases, for the outcomes of that. We also have deep concerns about the unemployment that already exists, youth unemployment at 15%, 442,000 youth are out of work, and that's the largest number since the Great Recession. We don't believe the Liberals when they say that they'll create 90,000 jobs when we have lost more than 112,000 jobs just since January in this country. Again, no details in this plan, not a whole lot to digest.
And NDP MP Don Davies says that he is skeptical that widespread AI adoption will lead to net job creation.
The Liberals' AI strategy announced earlier today is reckless and inadequate. It leaves Canadians dangerously exposed. You know, it's entitled AI for All. It's more like all in for AI. We know that this technology can produce benefits for Canadians, but it needs effective regulation and strong guardrails. Look, we know that AI is driving mass surveillance, it's facilitating fraud, it's threatening jobs. It consumes huge amounts of water and energy, and it targets the most vulnerable members in our society, including children and seniors. And yet, the Liberals rushed through a superficial and quick consultation, and now they're mouthing the lines of tech billionaires. Their message to CEOs is they can drive ahead today on AI, but for Canadians, the protection for them, well, that can wait. So we're calling on the Liberals to scrap this inadequate policy, and the NDP is calling for a humans-first AI strategy, one that protects Canadian communities, Canadian jobs, Canadian small business, and Canadian natural resources.
I sat down with Yael Osowski, the Deputy Director of the Consumer Choice Centre, for more on the federal government's new AI strategy. Now, Canada has just unveiled a national AI strategy with more than $2 billion in funding. What stands out to you most about this plan?
Well, we have a lot of values testing, so you can tell that the federal government is very excited about AI and getting the federal government involved. And it does include a lot of values testing for specifically federal government grants. And I think that's kind of a missed opportunity because there's a lot of stuff you could see from Ottawa on AI. You could see a lot of clarity when it comes to some of the federal rules, but this just looks like they're opening the checkbook, and a lot of taxpayers in Canada are going to end up paying for innovations, and it's going to really create a race for people to get these grants rather than just focusing on AI innovations that consumers could benefit from.
Now, you talk about missed opportunities. Do you see this being a turning point for Canada's AI sector, or do you think that more work needed to be done to actually set that up as this kind of an opportunity?
Well, I think like so many different sectors, really a lot of the innovation that's happening is private entrepreneurs who are collaborating with researchers at universities, then also larger tech companies that might be in the United States. So a lot of this is happening in Vancouver, a lot of it's happening in Toronto, some in Montreal. And I think there has to be more of a recognition that the government will not be the driver of AI. If anything, it's supposed to set clear rules and guidelines and make it easier for developers and entrepreneurs to come up with those innovations. I think that's probably one of the biggest missed opportunities here. And number two is energy. Canada has such a capacity to build that compute. And I think there's too much in the plan that focuses on sustainability, how they're going to use clean power. Canada could actually offer so many tech companies and so many different AI innovators the exact location where they could build that compute. And I think they should have focused a bit more on that and less on sort of the cultural funding that we know is generally the plan of the Liberal government in this case.
Now, there is a bit of a fine line with that because environmentalists lately have really been pushing the Carney government to prioritize the environment more. So, what could the Carney government have done to focus on AI infrastructure and actually grow it, as well as these AI data centers, but also keep the environmentalists happy?
I think the number one thing is just to understand what the roadblocks are for building, particularly those data centers, and understanding, it's a politically fraught moment for anyone who's building data centers. It's throughout North America and Europe. You're having debates, a lot of NIMBYism, where nobody wants to have these data centers. We can see actually in British Columbia, there are a lot of people who are citing Virginia and their data centers and some of the political problems there. I think the government could have just made it a bit more clear and had a road plan for how they can get construction companies to the table, how they can get some of the tech innovators and investors to the table, and how they're going to clear that. They've already discussed it with these large plans they're going to do for industrial purposes, for the energy sector, and the same has to apply to AI and technology. Because I know people want to see data centers as some, separate thing or category, but realistically, it's the internet and it's computers, cloud computing that is running every single digital service that we use. So to see from Ottawa some sort of clarity, some sort of path where there aren't going to be as many roadblocks, I think that would have been really helpful.
Now, one of the biggest conversations that comes up with AI is job losses and what's going to happen with job security. Following Mark Carney's announcement yesterday, critics, including opposition MPs, were warning about potential job losses tied to AI adoption. How realistic, in your opinion, are these concerns?
I think there are definitely going to be some jobs that are changed. I don't know about lost necessarily, because a lot of things are just going to transition. And it's something that the government can kind of plan for. And they do have that written out in their strategy, talking about jobs training, talking about the skills and the tools that people would be able to use. But they're also going to be creating tens of thousands of new jobs, things that we can't even imagine that exist. It's the same with the internet and everything that's been provided in all of the decades since. There are all types of jobs that we can't even plan for that we know are going to be created. I think the government does have a role, at least, in setting out that path and helping with that workforce development, which, again, they started to carve out a strategy there. A lot of the provinces are probably going to have a lot more robust power to do that and in a more effective way. But I do think it is a conversation that is worth having because it is going to be a systemic change and a shift. And the industries and the people that are really prepared to take that on are the ones who are going to advantage really the most.
As a new federal AI strategy was rolled out this week, Canada is facing growing scrutiny over the rapid expansion of high-capacity data centers and their environmental impact. Data centers, long largely out of public view, are now drawing increased attention as new facilities being built across the country reach dramatically higher power demands. Research from York University shows the latest generation of data centers can have up to 10 times the capacity of earlier facilities, raising concerns about land use, water consumption, and energy needs. Alberta has emerged as a key hub for development with abundant energy resources, streamlined regulations, and a welcoming policy environment for new investment. But not all provinces are embracing the trend. Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew says the province will not approve a proposed large-scale AI data center south of Winnipeg. Kinew says hyperscale data centers do not appear to be in the best interest of Manitobans, citing environmental concerns and limited local economic benefits.
Today we announced that we're not going to move ahead with the data center in Ile-des-Chênes because there's a big threat to the environment and not much benefit to the economy. And we've taken a close look at it. The Act in Manitoba allows us to prioritize who gets hydro. We've put this at the bottom of the list, basically, and so that's our way of saying we're not going to be supporting this project to move forward. When you look at what's happening across North America when it comes to data centers, I think right now you could get close to the frontier with a large language model, an open source model. You could even get a Canadian model. You can get open weights off of Cohere. You could run it on a MacBook. It'll be an expensive MacBook, but it's usable. And so I think we should be skeptical about the hyperscale data centers that are being pitched in a lot of jurisdictions, just from an economic perspective. So again, the idea of a hyperscale data center, no. AI generally, yeah. Sovereign compute, independence and freedom from big American tech companies when it comes to your private information, yes. But what that will look like is at a much different scale than this project that was proposed in Ile-des-Chênes and a lot of what is getting pushed in some other jurisdictions.
The project would have been part of the expanding network of AI-driven data facilities being developed across Canada. One of the federal Liberal signature affordability measures is landing in Canadians' bank accounts starting today. Top-up payments under the new Canada Groceries and Essentials benefit are being issued to eligible recipients. The one-time payment is worth 50% of the annual GST/HST credit and is expected to reach roughly 12 million Canadians. Prime Minister Mark Carney spoke about the benefit top-up.
Today, 12 million Canadians, including 5 million Ontarians, will receive a first-time increase in what's called the Groceries and Essentials benefit. So if they're buying fresh produce here at Hello Fresh, they have a little bit more money in order to do so and feed their family however they want, but nutritiously. So that increase will bring the total amount for a family of four this year to over $1,800, $1,890 this year. And what we're going to do is that we're increasing by 25% that groceries benefit and essentials benefit relative to the past going forward. So it's a significant amount of money, checks up to $533 today for a family of.
Eligible recipients will receive the money automatically through direct deposit or by mail. Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew is sharply criticizing the Trump administration's proposed new 10% tariff on Canadian goods, calling for a strong response from Ottawa. Kinew defended the Canada-US-Mexico agreement, arguing that if the United States chooses to target Canada's economy, Canada must be prepared to respond in kind. The Premier summed up his position with a slogan that has quickly gained attention: "No Kuzma, no Boozma," a reference to removing American alcohol from store shelves if trade relations continue to deteriorate.
So our position will maintain, where we've been so far, the elbows up perspective, and our perspective here in Manitoba is no Kuzma, no Boozma.
While the national conversation over another pipeline from Alberta to the West Coast continues, some positive news was announced regarding the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Our contributor, David Clement, has more.
Canada's federally owned Trans Mountain Pipeline system is about to hit a major milestone. Its CEO says the line will be running at full capacity as early as this month. Trans Mountain Chief Executive Mark Mackey confirmed the surge is already underway, and he points to three big drivers: strong growth in Alberta oil production, other export pipelines out of the province sitting full, and a global energy crunch triggered by the war in Iran that has removed millions of barrels from world markets. The Trans Mountain system, which carries crude from Edmonton to the West Coast Marine Terminal in Burnaby, British Columbia, is now operating at record volumes. Mackey says the timing couldn't be better for Ottawa's long-term plan to eventually sell the Crown Corporation, saying, quote, "When's the best time to sell a restaurant? Well, when it's full." But he warned against rushing the sale too soon, saying, quote, "If you try to sell it today, someone's going to go, well, I don't believe you," and so there's going to start discounting that. Mackey also outlined ambitious next steps. The company is launching a series of optimization projects that will lift total capacity by roughly 34%, an extra 300,000 barrels per day. BC is already on board, approving dredging of the Second Narrows waterway to allow more tanker loading and pressing utility BC Hydro to support the upgrades. Looking further ahead, though, Mackey says Canada urgently needs even more pipeline capacity to the Pacific. He highlighted a recent memorandum of understanding signed between Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and Prime Minister Mark Carney to unlock new export routes amid U.S. President Donald Trump's trade pressures. The CEO believes a southern British Columbia route for any new line has more merit than northern options, citing deep opposition from First Nations communities. He recounted blunt conversations, saying, quote, "No one wants to have a spill, a leak, or anything else. They don't even want to deal with the chance." But Mackey struck an optimistic note on markets, especially China. He pointed to massive refineries there turning Canadian crude into petrochemicals and plastics, not just fuel. He added, saying that people have got to get their heads out of the idea that it's going to be burned. He added that Canada's Pacific access gives the country a really important advantage in reaching fast-growing Asian buyers. The federal government continues to hold the asset after buying and completing the controversial expansion. While not everyone in the oil patch is convinced a brand new pipeline will ever be built, Mackey insists it's too critical to the country to let it fall by the wayside. This announcement comes as Canadian energy leaders push hard to diversify away from heavy reliance on the United States. With the line posed to run flat out, pressure is now on regulators and Indigenous groups to clear the path for the next wave of projects. For Canada's oil sector and federal coffers, June could mark the start of a much fuller pipeline and a much stronger bargaining position.
Ontario says it will publicly identify businesses fined for selling event tickets above face value as part of a tougher crackdown on ticket resale violations. The province says the move is aimed at protecting consumers from inflated prices for concerts, sports, and entertainment events, while improving transparency in the ticket market. Officials say businesses found in violation will face fines and have their names made public as a deterrent against illegal resale practices. The government says the enhanced enforcement is designed to make it harder for scalpers to exploit high-demand events and drive up costs for fans.
We want the average person to be able to go to venues, sports venues, concerts, without getting gouged. And I don't have to tell all of you and the listeners about getting gouged for tickets. Some of these resellers are gouging the people 10, 20 times the cost of a ticket. And this is such a great thing for the people of Ontario, that they can actually go to an affordable concert, an affordable sports venue. This is a massive win for the people of Ontario. So we're moving extremely fast on this. And we're going to hold people accountable. We've increased the fines, I think, up to $25,000. We're making the list public for people that want to try to take advantage of the taxpayers. We're here to protect the taxpayers. They're there to make a profit. I have no problem with companies making a profit. I have a problem with monopolies and gouging the average citizen that can't bring their kids to a game. It's unfortunate. It's got to this point because, no other cities in North America, the people, nowhere else do they get gouged like they do in the city of Toronto.
And health has become a main priority heading into the FIFA World Cup. Public health experts are preparing to monitor infectious disease risks as millions of fans travel across North America for the World Cup. At Georgetown University, researchers are establishing a monitoring hub designed to detect early warning signs of potential outbreaks during the tournament. The system will track health data trends as crowds move between host cities.
Welcome to the Health Security Operations Center that we've stood up in time for the World Cup. We have converted an old microbiology laboratory. Anytime you bring people together, particularly when you bring people together from around the world, there is a chance that diseases will spread. So we set up a Health Security Operations Center to be able to monitor for any infectious disease threats that might occur over the summer, whether it's associated with the World Cup, whether it's associated with any of the other mass gatherings that are happening. We're operating independently, but in support of local, state, and federal health officials. We're operating a little bit like air traffic control, right? And being able to help share information across different groups and different boundaries. So all of the wastewater surveillance companies have been contributing to this, so it's pretty neat. So folks are looking at that data and then doing analyses on it. Again, being able to look at what's happening for, say, SARS-CoV-2, so COVID, influenza, norovirus, rotavirus, right? And knowing what patterns are happening in every jurisdiction across the country.
Attention is also turning to how major sporting events can deliver economic benefits for host regions. The Alberta government is investing $1.3 million to support 12 national and international sporting events scheduled to take place in the province this year. Sport and Tourism Minister Andrew Boychenko says the funding will support events including curling, BMX, triathlon, and wrestling. He added that hosting major competitions helps boost tourism.
The 7 events successfully hosted earlier this year welcomed more than 103,000 participants and generated over $77 million in local economic activity. From the World's Women Curling Championship in Calgary, to Biathlon Nationals in Canmore, to the Canadian Wrestling Championship in Grande Prairie, communities across Alberta have shown their ability to deliver exceptional sporting experience. And the momentum continues. Kicking off Alberta's summer, the 2026 American Cup Series is returning right here to climb YAG from June 26 to June 28. This event will bring elite climbers from across South, Central, and North America to Edmonton to compete at one of North America's premier climbing facilities.
Canada's economy added 88,000 jobs in May, pushing the unemployment rate down to 6.6% and defying expectations of only modest growth. Statistics Canada says the strong gain marks the first significant employment increase since November and signals resilience in the labor market despite softer overall economic growth. The May increase erased nearly 80% of the job losses recorded in the first 4 months of 2026, when the economy shed a net 112,000 positions. Analysts had expected only about 10,000 new jobs and for unemployment to remain at 6.9%, the 6-month high reached in April. NDP MPs are calling for stronger safeguards in Canada's labor system to prevent employer-dominated unions. They say existing rules do not go far enough to protect workers from situations where employers may have undue influence over union structures, leadership, or bargaining processes. The MPs argue reforms are needed to ensure collective bargaining remains fully independent and truly representative of employees' interests without employer interference. They say stronger protections are essential to maintain trust in the labor system and uphold workers' rights.
Today, Parliament will debate a simple idea. Workers deserve representation, real representation. The fact is, real unions represent workers and fake unions do not. Right now, federal law recognizes that employer-dominated fake unions are a problem. It says they should not exist, but in practice, we know they do. And once certified, workers are left with no real way to challenge them once they've been put in place. And that gap matters, because when workers can't trust the organization speaking for them, everything else breaks down. Wages fall behind, working conditions get weaker, and workers across the entire country lose the protections they need. Let me be very clear. Most unions do exactly what they are meant to do. They fight for their members every day. They bargain hard, they improve conditions, they raise standards for all workers. Real unions support this bill because it protects the rights that they have fought for generations to win. This legislation is not about those unions. It's about fake or company unions. There aren't many of them, but where they exist, where employer influence exists, and where workers are left without a meaningful way to respond, fake unions hurt all workers.
The federal government says it will take more time before moving ahead with proposed changes to how major projects are reviewed in Canada. Ottawa had recently outlined reforms that could allow some major projects to be approved before full environmental reviews and potentially exempt certain developments for species at risk protections.
The Althea Raj piece in the Toronto Star that explained how the discussion document and the proposed changes to the Species at Risk Act could lead to the extinction, specifically carved out and designed to allow for the extinction of the southern resident killer whales, is causing insiders in the government to rethink the legislation they were going to bring forward. That's why I'm calling for both discussion documents to be shredded and not to pursue a path for further destruction of the precautionary principle.
The consultation deadline has now been extended to July 22nd, with legislation pushed to the fall to allow for further review and input. Transport Minister Stephen McKinnon says there are enormous issues at play, and the government wants to hear a full range of perspectives before proceeding. Critics, including Green Party leader Elizabeth May, argue the proposed changes could weaken environmental safeguards. St. John Energy says it is creating a digital twin of its electricity grid to support research and innovation in the sector. The publicly owned utility says the virtual replica will provide a simulated environment with near real-time data, allowing companies and researchers to test projects without impacting the actual system. As part of an early use case, a team of researchers and students at Concordia University will use the model to study residential retrofits and identify upgrades that could reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now it's time for our weekly energy update with Dan McTeague, president of Canadians for Affordable Energy. All yours, Dan.
Well, now, Teresa, we're in the second week of June, and of course, prices can be all over the map. But we've seen, prices at the pumps across Canada for both diesel and gasoline move up, only to have them turtle once again. And it looks like the headlines really continue to dominate prices at $100 or $95 a barrel. Take your pick as to whether it's WTI or Brent. And although it's creating some confusing signals, most people, and rightly so, analysts would have expected that headlines would not be driving prices down. They'd be driving prices up. We've now heard, for the ninth time, peace treaty or potential for the straits to open up. That hasn't happened. Hasn't happened in 95, 96, 97 days. And the world's going to continue to use up its buffer, the critical emergency supplies of oil. We're burning through that, and there's nothing left at the end of this. So what's happened, and I think people need to understand, I called it short selling. Basically, people trying to assume that the price will fall, but afterwards, and therefore bet that sooner or later prices will have to climb back down to reflect things getting back to normal. But there'll be nothing normal about the Straits of Hormuz or about the relationship in the Middle East. It is likely broken forever. And with that, even the time it takes to repair and restore the flows of oil, what we have to recognize is that the biggest move was done by the U.S. government to release what amounts to up to now about 65 million barrels from its Strategic Petroleum Reserve. That's a reserve in the salt caverns of Louisiana, where there was as much as 700 million barrels. Under the Biden administration, that went to 500, a little under 500. And under Trump, it's now gone to about 370, 380. When you hit 300 or half or less than half of what's there, it does create some real problems for the containment of the oil that's there, because, as I mentioned, it's in old salt mines, and those can begin to collapse and create really problems for reinjection down the road. But that brings me to why we've seen prices not move up, and why we've seen a bit of a passive point, and whether markets look like they understand or not. The reality is, this is called the repo loan arrangement. Basically, it's like this: oil companies buy oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. They buy, say, 1 million barrels, but they're required to replace it with 1.3 to 1.5 million barrels, and that's one of the main reasons why the commitment to do that, whether they can get it or not, is the primary factor for markets to consider. Well, they're going to get more back than what they're taking out. Therefore, there'll be a lot more oil. Except that the fundamentals don't support that. There is no more oil out there, and how they're going to do it and over what period of time really depends on the extent to which this matter will continue to drag down global supplies. And what that means here is that, we're a little happier that we're paying in the high 160s on average in Canada. And by the way, AffordableEnergy.ca has made some modifications to the website. I don't do as much the gas price wizard because it's kind of ridiculous to do two at the same time, very time consuming. But we have the national average. We can have a look back to what you were paying a year ago this time. Well, that's because we've got 30 years of data. And so it's pretty simple to try to figure these things out. I know a lot of people tend to think they have their data. That might be, 15 weeks old, 15 days old, or 15 years old. Ours is goes a lot further back than that. Nevertheless, it does provide an opportunity to let people know that the average price is far lower than it should be. The only way in which you're going to get supply to be restored and stop this constant drain to the point where we were dealing with the last barrel of oil that we're really fighting for out there is to get prices much higher to, as it were, dampen demand, or what they call demand destruction. It's a terrible thing to say, but it's the only way in which to get things to slow down and demand to finally meet the lower levels of supply until we can get supply back up and running. The fact that we are not doing this only means we are delaying the inevitable. It's short-term gain, long-term pain. And as much as people are uncomfortable with paying an extra 30, 40 cents a litre than what they were paying, say, in February, despite the government moving to take 10 cents off plus GST, HST, and despite the maneuvering through this thing that I refer to the repo loans arrangement by the U.S. government to oil companies borrowing from the SPR, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, the reality is that we're going to have to see much higher prices, and those higher prices may be triggered not by economic fundamentals, but by scarcity and by shortages. And those shortages will mean inevitably, in many parts of the world, rationing, allocation. And so I'm talking about a much bigger issue here than talking about gas prices, which I think across Canada will probably go up on Tuesday or Wednesday, only come down by Thursday and Friday. But the trigger time is the end of the month. There's no doubt the month of June is going to show a lot of countries in Southeast Asia, nations in Europe are going to begin to demonstrate that they simply don't have. We know they have a problem with jet fuel. It's going to spill over to diesel as well as to gasoline, and North America is not going to be immune. So although it's not good news, it never is, you have a crisis of a generation. We've never seen anything like this before. It changes the dynamic, and it means that sooner or later, markets and commodities markets are going to have to wake up and get the proper price signals out there to reflect the scarcity, the real energy crunch that we have. That means that in June, we could see prices move up to $150 a barrel, which is the actual physical cost of barrels of oil these days, not 90 or 100, wherever you're seeing on the print. The reality is that we're looking for a major increase, a major hit soon. When that happens is anyone's guess, but I'm betting it'll be towards the end of June. That's it for this week, Teresa. We'll keep you informed as to what the big price trends are for the next few weeks as we keep doing this as we've done for the past several years right here on News Forum.
Treaty 8 First Nations in Alberta are calling on Premier Danielle Smith to abandon plans for a referendum question on provincial separation. Grand Chief Trevor McCready says First Nations expect the province to uphold its consultation obligations and fulfill its duty to consult Indigenous communities. McCready says Smith has misrepresented the law and is urging her to withdraw comments suggesting the duty to consult applies only to major development projects. Independent BC legislator Jordan Keeley is denying sexual assault charges that have derailed expectations that he would return to the BC Conservative Caucus. The BC Prosecution Service says Keeley has been charged in relation to allegations dating from between January and September of 2024, prior to his election as MLA for Peace River North. Keeley says he is innocent and intends to prove it in court. He is scheduled to make his first court appearance in Fort St. John on July 6th. Justice Minister Sean Fraser says Canadians can't afford to wait any longer for stronger legal protections against the use of sexualized AI deepfakes. Fraser says Parliament must urgently pass Bill C-16 before the summer recess, as more Canadians are being targeted by deepfake content created using their likeness without consent.
We have an opportunity to build upon the robust study that took place at the Justice Committee, to build upon the feedback that stakeholders from across Canada have asked us to implement, and to further consider measures not only in the debate that remains in the House, but at the Senate over the next number of weeks. The decision that is facing Parliament today is whether we want to immediately take steps to offer these protections to people who would potentially become victims. My suggestion is that now is the appropriate time to act. Yes, we can conduct our studies. Yes, we can propose necessary amendments, but we cannot delay justice for people who've been denied. The problem that we want it to cure was the fact that there was a dissonance between what the law said and the reality that people are living through. More specifically, intimate images, as defined in the criminal code, did not include those generated through the use of AI deepfakes, and the sharing of those intimate images, which reflects the crime that exists on the books today, needed to be updated, so we were treating AI deepfakes on par with intimate images that were taken in the real world but shared without consent. There is a debate playing out. I don't want to prejudge what potential amendments the Senate may propose, but whether it would be more expansive to include the creation and not only the sharing of these images is something that I invite senators to consider.
The Liberals are bracing for a possible clash with the Senate over the proposed criminal justice legislation. Fraser says AI-generated deepfakes present new enforcement challenges that existing laws do not fully address. A growing concern around artificial intelligence extends beyond deepfakes into increasingly sophisticated fraud schemes targeting Canadians. The Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre says Canadians lost a record $704 million to scams and fraud in 2025. The Better Business Bureau says AI is now being used in so-called grandparent scams, making it harder for victims to detect fraudulent calls and messages. Our Western Canada Bureau Chief Hal Roberts spoke with Wes LaFortune of the BBB for more of the details.
Wes, can you really explain how the grandparent scheme actually works?
Yep, it's unfortunately a scam that continues to pop up across Canada. And it's very troubling because people are targeted, often seniors, but it isn't necessarily just seniors. So what happens is you'll get a phone call out of the blue saying that perhaps your grandchild has been injured in a foreign country, in hospital, needs money, or arrested, needs bail money. And of course, that's a very distressing call to receive, and you want to help. And that's the scam. So they will, either it'll be an official authority figure on the phone or actually a clip of your relative. And how that's done is through artificial intelligence. So they will use your relative's voice from a social media site. They'll take a clip. It's called cloning. They'll clone the voice so it sounds exactly like the person in your family. And then they recreate this scenario where, the person's in trouble and they need money. So that's the scam.
Wow, a sophisticated con job here. Now, Wes, apparently a lot of the con artists are doing their homework as well, as you mentioned, on social media profiles to gather some valuable information.
Absolutely. And it really goes back to the point that you should always kind of be cautious about what you're posting on social media, because there are unfortunately people that use that information for, nefarious reasons. So if you receive a phone call like that out of the blue, you have to be very skeptical, first of all, that it's the actual person in trouble. Many families have come up with a code word that they use so that they can verify the identity of the person in question. So it could be any kind of word, but specific to your family. It's not used anywhere else. So then you say to the person, "Hey, what's the family code word?" "I don't know." Well, it's probably very likely a scammer. And the other thing is don't send money to strangers. Don't buy gift cards for these people. That's what they're going to ask for often, or cryptocurrency. They like to get paid that way. These are all indications of a scam.
So, Wes, do we know where a lot of these scams originate? Are there call centers filled with con artists trying to defraud Canadians of their money?
There are those centers, there are those places where it's professional scammers. And then there's also the folks that are, let's call them amateur scammers. They will call you from your community and they will say, give you the exact same scenario. And what's really frightening is they will actually come to people's homes and pick up cash. So, not only are you getting this phone call, but then you have somebody who's could be dangerous coming to your home, your front step. So that's very scary. If you think you're being targeted by a scammer, let's call them what they are, criminals like this, and they're going to come to your home, call 911. Because that's a dangerous situation. Otherwise, if you've been subjected to a scam like this, you've lost money, call the police using the non-emergency line.
Wes LaFortune, Community Specialist with the Better Business Bureau. Really appreciate you making the time today. Thank you.
My pleasure.
There was a rally in Raleigh as the Carolina Hurricanes even the Stanley Cup final with a Game 2 overtime win on home ice, bouncing back after dropping the series opener. Seth Jarvis scored on a power play one-timer in the extra frame to lift Carolina to a 4-3 victory over the Vegas Golden Knights.
Along the half boards, and now it's Gostis pair. Carlson and Eichel, the penalty killers, scores! Overtime winner! And Seth Jarvis evens the series on a game apiece.
The Hurricanes trailed 2-0 entering the third period after a slow start, but responded with 3 unanswered goals to take the lead before Vegas forced overtime with a late equalizer. The win improves Carolina to 6-0 in overtime this postseason. Carolina's head coach Rob Brindamore spoke on the team's comeback performance.
We were kind of dud in the second because we took some penalties that got us on our heels, and then the first 10 minutes of the third wasn't great, and then somebody had to step up. Somebody had to make a play, and that's what happens. Danks makes a play. All of a sudden, you get the building going again, and then somebody else made a play. Will Carey makes an unbelievable play. And then Jenks, great shot. So all of a sudden now the games start over and, go from there. So long answer to your question, but someone had to step up and make a play. But you get a new kind of shot of life, is what it feels like. And that's what we definitely needed. And I'm happy for the guys and proud of them because they just kept coming, and that's what we have to do.
Game 3 goes tomorrow night in Vegas. And over to the NBA, Victor Wembanyama says he accepts responsibility for his role in San Antonio's Game 1 loss in the NBA Finals, but insists that he's not worried in the slightest about the team's outlook as the series continues.
It's obviously, it's not we've been down in a series before, never in the finals, obviously. But I'm not kicking myself about anything, really. I'm not worried the slightest. We let them get an offensive rebound, so that's on us. And after that, that's an experienced team. They know how to play with momentum. And we had the momentum until late in that game. This is why I said we let that one go. Protocol is big for me. And by protocol, I mean doing everything right, doing all the film I need to do, doing all the recovery, speaking to my team, figuring out the things and holding each other accountable. That's, for me, doesn't get more complicated than that. I'm not an overthinker.
Minutes after the New York Knicks opened the series with a 105-95 win on Wednesday, Wemby acknowledged a difficult night where he recorded 6 turnovers and 15 missed shots, both postseason highs. Despite that, he still led the Spurs with 26 points, 12 rebounds, and 3 blocks, becoming just the 4th player since blocks were officially tracked in 1974 to post that stat line in a finals debut. I'm Teresa Skupik, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for tonight. Good night, Canada.